The day Hannah Cooper's father sold her to Everett Whitfield was the day her heart turned to stone. Spring of 1876 brought no blossoms of hope to the small town of Redemption Creek, Colorado, only the bitter reality that a 17-year-old debt would be paid with her hand in marriage. At 20 years old, Hannah had dreamed of love, of gentle hands and kind words, not the sour stench of whiskey and the heavy fists of a man twice her age. "You'll go with him tomorrow," her father had said, not meeting her eyes as he pocketed the money that would save their failing ranch. "He's promised to take care of you." Hannah stood now in the small bedroom of Whitfield's ramshackle house on the edge of town, her meager possessions unpacked, her wedding band a tarnished circle too large for her finger threatening to slip off with each trembling movement. 3 weeks into this farce of a marriage, and she had already learned to time her housework around Everett's drinking schedule, to cook meals that might soak up enough alcohol to dull his temper, to disappear when the bottle ran dry. The sound of breaking glass from the front room made her flinch. Everett was home early. "Woman, where's my dinner?" His words slurred together like mud sliding down a riverbank. Hannah wiped her hands on her apron and took a steadying breath before stepping into the front room. "I wasn't expecting you until sundown, Everett. I'll have something ready shortly." He swayed in the doorway, his eyes narrowed to slits. "Not good enough. Man works all day, expects his wife to do her job." He stumbled toward her, and Hannah backed away, her spine meeting the edge of the table. The stew will only take his open palm connected with her cheek before she could finish. The force knocked her sideways, and she caught herself against the wall, tears springing to her eyes. "Don't talk back to me, girl. Your pa should have taught you better." Hannah bit her tongue until she tasted blood. Arguing would only make things worse. She'd learned that lesson all too quickly. As Everett collapsed into his chair, already reaching for another bottle, Hannah slipped into the kitchen, her hand pressed to her stinging cheek. Outside the small window, she could see the first stars appearing in the dusky sky. How many nights had she spent as a child, wishing on those same stars? Now she wished for something simpler. Survival, morning brought blessed silence. Everett had passed out before midnight, and Hannah had slept in the chair by the stove, unwilling to share his bed unless forced. She rose with the sun, her body aching from the uncomfortable position, and set about her chores. Everett would sleep until noon, giving her a few precious hours of peace. She was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Visitors were rare, and Hannah smoothed her hair and skirts, conscious of the fading bruise on her cheekbone. A tall figure on horseback came into view, and Hannah shielded her eyes against the morning sun to get a better look. The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of a man at home in the saddle. His broad shoulders tapered to a narrow waist, and his face, partially shaded by a well-worn hat, bore the weathered look of someone who lived under open skies. "Madam," he called, keeping a respectful distance. "Sorry to trouble you. My name's Kieran Turner. I work for the Rockingham Ranch north of here. I'm looking for Everett Whitfield." Hannah's fingers tightened around the damp sheet in her hands. "He's indisposed at the moment. I'm his wife, Hannah." Something flickered in the cowboy's blue eyes as they darted to her bruised cheek, then quickly away. "Mrs. Whitfield, my boss sent me about a herd of cattle Whitfield sold him last month. There's been some trouble with the paperwork." "I see." Hannah pinned the sheet to the line. "He won't be up for some hours yet. Would you like to wait? I could offer you some coffee." Kieran nodded, removing his hat. "That's mighty kind, madam. I'd appreciate it." In the kitchen, Hannah felt strangely nervous as she prepared the coffee. It had been so long since she'd spoken to anyone other than Everett or the shopkeepers in town. Kieran Turner stood respectfully by the door, hat in hand, his gaze taking in the sparse furnishings but never lingering on her bruise. "How long have you been married, Mrs. Whitfield?" he asked as she handed him the steaming cup. 3 weeks, Hannah replied, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "Newlyweds, then. Congratulations." But his tone held no joy, and his eyes, when they met hers, contained something that looked startlingly like understanding. Hannah looked away. "How long have you worked at the Rockingham?" 5 years now. Started as a ranch hand, worked my way up to foreman last year." He took a sip of his coffee. "Boss is getting older, looking to scale back, puts more responsibility on my shoulders each season." Hannah nodded, finding unexpected comfort in this simple conversation. Do you enjoy it, the work I mean? A genuine smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines. Yes, madam, I do. There's something honest about it, working with the land, the animals. Seeing the fruits of your labor with each passing season. The sound of heavy footsteps and coughing from the back room cut their conversation short. Hannah's posture immediately stiffened, and she saw Kieran notice the change. That'll be my husband, she said quietly. Everett shuffled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and unkempt. His suspicious gaze darted between Hannah and Kieran. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Kieran straightened, all business now. Kieran Turner, sir, from the Rockingham. I've come about the cattle sale from last month. Everett's bloodshot eyes narrowed. What about it? Money's been paid. Yes, sir, but there's a discrepancy in the count. Mr. Matthews sent me to straighten it out. Hannah moved to pour Everett coffee, but he shoved her hand away, reaching instead for a bottle on the shelf. She stepped back, folding her hands in front of her. Tell Matthews he got what he paid for, Everett growled, taking a swig directly from the bottle. Kieran's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Matthews believes there's been a mistake. 20 head were paid for, but only 18 arrived. Not my problem if he can't count. He's asking for the remaining cattle or a refund of the appropriate amount. Everett slammed the bottle down. He'll get nothing, now get out of my house. Hannah flinched at the outburst, and Kieran's eyes flicked to her briefly before returning to Everett. Mr. Matthews won't be pleased, Kieran said evenly. He's a fair man, but he doesn't take kindly to being cheated. Everett lurched forward, jabbing a finger into Kieran's chest. You calling me a cheat, boy? I'm delivering a message, sir. Kieran didn't back down, but neither did he escalate the confrontation. Mr. Matthews will be in town next Wednesday. He hopes to resolve this amicably. Everett spat on the floor. Tell him to go to hell. Kieran placed his hat back on his head with deliberate care. I'll relay your message, sir. He turned to Hannah, tipping his hat. Thank you for the coffee, Mrs. Whitfield. After Kieran left, Everett's rage found its target in Hannah. Making eyes at strange men while I sleep. Is that the kind of wife you are? No, Everett, I was just being hospitable. The back of his hand connected with her mouth, splitting her lip. Don't lie to me. Hannah tasted blood as she stumbled backward. Everett advanced on her, bottle still in hand, and she closed her eyes, bracing for the next blow, but it never came. Instead, she heard the sound of a horse outside, followed by Everett's angry mutterings as he grabbed his hat. Going to town, he growled. Have dinner ready when I get back and clean yourself up. You look disgusting. The door slammed behind him and Hannah sank to the floor, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. 2 days passed in a haze of tension and fear. Everett's mood had darkened further, and Hannah bore the evidence on her body, a ring of bruises around her wrist, a scrape along her collarbone. She'd taken to wearing high-necked dresses despite the spring warmth, ashamed of the marks of her failure as a wife. She was in the garden, struggling to coax vegetables from the neglected soil, when she heard the now familiar sound of Kieran Turner's horse. Rising hastily, she brushed dirt from her skirts, conscious of her appearance in a way she hadn't been in weeks. Mrs. Whitfield, Kieran called, dismounting. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Mr. Turner. Hannah tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. My husband isn't here, I'm afraid. He's gone to town. Actually, it's you I came to see. Kieran's expression was serious as he approached. Mrs. Whitfield, Hannah, I wanted to make sure you were all right. Hannah stiffened. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. His voice was gentle but firm. The bruises on your face the other day, the way you flinch when he moves too quickly. Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes, but she blinked them back. It's not your concern, Mr. Turner, maybe not. Kieran stepped closer, his blue eyes filled with concern. But I couldn't just ride away and do nothing. No one deserves to live in fear, especially not in their own home. Hannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm spring air. What would you have me do? He's my husband. I have nowhere else to go. There are options, Kieran said carefully. The Rockingham is always looking for help. Mrs. Matthews needs assistance with the house, the cooking. You'd have a place to stay away from. He gestured vaguely toward the house. Hannah shook her head, though the offer tempted her more than she could admit. You don't understand. My father's debt, the The marriage was the payment. If I leave, Everett could take everything from my family. Kieran's expression darkened. Your father sold you to pay a debt. It wasn't like that, Hannah defended automatically, though it had been exactly like that. They were old friends. Everett loaned my father money years ago to save our ranch during a bad drought. When the bank was threatening foreclosure again this year, Everett offered to forgive the debt in exchange for marriage. That's not friendship, Kieran said quietly. That's exploitation. Hannah looked away, unable to bear the compassion in his eyes. Please, Mr. Turner. I appreciate your concern, but you should go before Everett returns. Kieran reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Take this. It's the location of the Rocking M and directions on how to get there. If you ever need help, any kind of help, you come find us. Hannah hesitated before accepting the paper, tucking it into her apron pocket. Thank you, but I'll be fine. Will you? His gaze dropped to the bruises on her wrist, visible where her sleeve had pulled back. Hannah tugged her sleeve down. I should get back to work. Kieran nodded, sensing her discomfort. Of course, but remember, the offer stands. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing, Mrs. Whitfield. Mr. Matthews still wants to resolve the cattle issue. He'll be at the Redemption Creek Saloon next Wednesday at noon. After Kieran left, Hannah pulled the paper from her pocket, reading the careful directions. The thought of escape both terrified and exhilarated her. But what would become of her father if she fled, and what kind of woman abandoned her marriage vows, no matter the circumstances? With a sigh, Hannah tucked the paper into a small tin where she kept her few treasures and returned to her gardening, trying to ignore the voice in her head that whispered of freedom. That evening, Everett returned from town drunker than usual, a dangerous gleam in his eye. Saw your cowboy friend in town today, he slurred, cornering Hannah in the kitchen. Mighty interested in our business, ain't he? Hannah's heart raced. He's not my friend, Everett. He works for Mr. Matthews, that's all. Don't lie to me. Everett grabbed her arm, fingers digging into the existing bruises. I saw how he looked at you, how you looked at him, making a fool of me in my own house. Please, Everett, you're hurting me. His open hand struck her face, snapping her head back. You're my wife, mine. Each word was punctuated with another blow until Hannah crumpled to the floor, arms raised to protect her head. Everett stood over her, breathing heavily. Get up, get dinner on the table. Hannah struggled to her feet, using the wall for support. Her vision swam and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut into her cheek. Somehow she managed to serve the stew she'd prepared earlier, her hands shaking so badly she spilled some on the tablecloth. Everett ate in silence, downing more whiskey with each bite. Eventually, he passed out at the table, his face planted in the remains of his meal. Hannah cleaned up around him, then retreated to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. In the small mirror above the washbasin, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her left eye was swelling shut, her lips split, blood matting her hair where her head had struck the floor. This couldn't go on. She wouldn't survive another month, let alone a lifetime with Everett Whitfield. With trembling fingers, Hannah retrieved the tin containing Kieran's directions. The Rocking M was about 15 miles north, a difficult journey on foot, but not impossible. She could leave tonight while Everett was unconscious. Take only what she could carry, use the moonlight to guide her, but her father, he would bear the brunt of Everett's rage. The debt would be reinstated, the ranch seized. Could she do that to him, even after he had sold her to save himself? Hannah sank onto the bed, the paper clutched in her hand. There had to be another way. Wednesday arrived with a tension in the air that matched the gathering storm clouds. Everett had been alternating between drunken fury and sullen silence for days, and Hannah's body bore fresh marks of his displeasure. This morning, though, he had dressed with unusual care, combing his thinning hair and trimming his beard. I'm going to town, he announced. Meeting with that Matthews fellow to settle this cattle business once and for all. Hannah nodded, keeping her eyes lowered. I'll have dinner waiting when you return. Everett grunted, then paused at the door. You've been a disappointing wife, Hannah. Your cooking is mediocre, you're clumsy, and you haven't given me a child yet. His cold eyes traveled over her. But you're mine, and I don't share what's mine. Remember that. After he left, Hannah pressed a cool cloth to her swollen eye, trying to reduce the worst of the bruising. The house felt different without Everett's looming presence, like she could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. The decision formed slowly as she went about her chores. She couldn't stay. She wouldn't survive. Her father had made his choice when he agreed to Everett's proposal, sacrificing her happiness for his own security. Now she had to make hers. Hannah packed quickly a change of clothes, her mother's locket, the small amount of money she'd managed to hide away over the weeks. The town was 3 miles east, the Rockingham 15 miles north. If she left now, she could be far away before Everett returned from his meeting. The first raindrops were falling as Hannah stepped onto the porch, bundle in hand. She hesitated, looking back at the house that had become her prison. Then, pulling her shawl over her head, she stepped into the rain and began walking toward town. She would need supplies for the longer journey to the Rockingham, and perhaps she could leave a message for her father, explaining her decision. The rain grew heavier as she walked, turning the dirt road to mud that clung to her boots and the hem of her dress. By the time she reached Redemption Creek, she was soaked to the skin, her teeth chattering with cold. The town was quiet, most people having sought shelter from the storm. Hannah hurried toward the general store, head down against the rain. She was so focused on her destination that she didn't see the man exiting the saloon until she collided with him. "I'm sorry, the words died in her throat as she looked up into Kieran Turner's surprised face. Hannah. His eyes widened at the sight of her bruised face, now partially washed clean of the powder she'd used to hide the worst marks. "My God, what happened to you?" Hannah couldn't speak. Weeks of fear and pain and hopelessness welled up inside her, and to her horror, she began to sob right there in the muddy street. Kieran didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and guided her toward the sheltered boardwalk. "It's all right," he murmured. "You're safe now." "I've got you." Through her tears, Hannah spotted Everett emerging from the saloon farther down the street, his face twisted in a familiar expression of rage. "He's here," she gasped, shrinking against Kieran. "Everett, he'll kill me if he finds me trying to leave." Kieran's expression hardened as he followed her gaze. "Not while I'm breathing," he promised. "Come on, my horse is behind the saloon. We need to get you somewhere safe." They hurried down an alley, the rain providing cover as they made their way to where Kieran's horse was tethered. Hannah could hear Everett shouting her name, his voice growing closer. "He'll never stop looking for me," Hannah whispered as Kieran helped her onto his horse. "The debt, my father, one problem at a time," Kieran said, swinging up behind her. "First, we get you to safety. Then we figure out the rest." They rode hard through the storm, leaving Redemption Creek behind. Hannah clung to the saddle horn, acutely aware of Kieran's solid presence at her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt safer than she had in weeks. The Rockingham Ranch appeared through the rain as a collection of sturdy buildings nestled in a valley. Smoke rose from the main house chimney, and warm light glowed from the windows. Kieran guided his horse directly to the front porch, where he dismounted quickly and helped Hannah down. "Mrs. Matthews," he called as he ushered Hannah inside. "We need help." A woman in her 50s hurried from the back of the house, her kind face creasing with concern when she saw Hannah's condition. "Good heavens, bring her in by the fire, Kieran. The poor dear is soaked through." "This is Hannah Whitfield," Kieran explained as Mrs. Matthews wrapped a blanket around Hannah's trembling shoulders. "Everett Whitfield's wife. She needs our help." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Matthews' eyes as she took in Hannah's bruised face. "Of course she does. Kieran, fetch some hot water and bandages. And where is Mr. Matthews?" "Still in town, madam. He was finishing business when I left with Hannah. Everett saw us, he'll be coming." Mrs. Matthews' mouth set in a determined line. "Then we'll be ready for him. This girl is under our protection now." The next hours passed in a blur for Hannah. Mrs. Matthews tended to her injuries with gentle hands, helped her change into dry clothes, and fed her hot soup that warmed her from the inside out. All the while, Kieran moved about the house, speaking in low tones to the ranch hands who came to the door, positioning men around the property. "Whitfield won't take this lying down," Mrs. Matthews said as she combed Hannah's damp hair. "He's a proud man and an angry one, but my husband is respected in these parts and Kieran is fiercely loyal. "You're safe here, child." Hannah struggled to believe it. "My father's debt will be handled," Mrs. Matthews assured her. "My husband has been looking for an excuse to deal with Everett Whitfield for years. The man's been a thorn in the side of every decent rancher in the territory." By nightfall, Mr. Matthews had returned, bringing news from town. "Whitfield's on a rampage," he told them, his weathered face grim. "Claiming kidnapping and theft. Sheriff's not buying it, though too many people have seen the state of you, Mrs. Whitfield." "Hannah," she corrected quietly. "Please, just Hannah," Mr. Matthews nodded. "Hannah, then. I want you to know that you're welcome here for as long as you need. We have room, and Mrs. Matthews could use the help around the house." "And your father's debt?" Kieran asked from where he stood by the window, keeping watch. "I'll buy it," Mr. Matthews said simply. "Offer Whitfield a fair price, more than he's owed. He's desperate for cash, been gambling away what little he had. If money's what he wants, money's what he'll get. But you," he looked at Hannah, "you're not part of that transaction." Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. "Why would you do this for me?" "You don't even know me," Mrs. Matthews patted her hand. "Because it's the right thing to do, child, and because Kieran asked us to." Hannah looked up to find Kieran watching her, something warm and protective in his gaze. He quickly looked away when their eyes met, but not before Hannah felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. True to Mr. Matthews' word, Everett arrived at the ranch just after dawn, drunk and armed, demanding the return of his wife. He was met by Mr. Matthews, Kieran, and 4 ranch hands, all carrying rifles. Hannah watched from the window as Mr. Matthews spoke to Everett, his posture calm but unyielding. Everett gesticulated wildly, his face red with rage. At one point, he reached for his gun, only to freeze when every rifle on the porch aimed at his chest. Finally, Mr. Matthews extended an envelope. Everett snatched it, counted the money inside, and spat on the ground, but he took it. With one last venomous look at the house, he mounted his horse and rode away. "Is it over?" Hannah asked when Kieran came inside. "Not legally," he admitted, "but Mr. Matthews knows a judge in Denver who can help with an annulment. Given the circumstances and with our testimony about your injuries, it should be granted. And my father, the debt's been paid. Whether he chooses to acknowledge what he did to you, that's between you and him." Kieran hesitated. "Hannah, I want you to know that you have choices now. You can stay here as long as you wish. Mrs. Matthews would be delighted to have your help. Or when you're ready, we can help you get to Denver or further east if that's what you want." Hannah looked around the warm kitchen at Mrs. Matthews humming as she prepared breakfast, at Mr. Matthews reading his newspaper by the fire. She thought of the terror of the previous day and the strange sense of peace she'd felt when Kieran had found her in town. "I'd like to stay," she said softly, "at least for now." The smile that lit Kieran's face made her heart skip. "I was hoping you'd say that." Summer came to the Rockingham in a blaze of wildflowers and long, golden evenings. Hannah's bruises faded, and with them, the worst of her fear. The annulment was granted in late June, the judge sympathetic to her plight and furious at the evidence of abuse. Everett, already deep in new gambling debts, didn't contest it. Hannah flourished under Mrs. Matthews' kind guidance. She learned to manage the large ranch house, to cook for the hungry ranch hands, to tend the kitchen garden that supplied their table. And whenever she could, she spent time with Kieran, learning about the ranch operations, riding out to check on the calves, or simply walking along the creek in the cool of the evening. "You're different," Kieran observed one such evening in early July. "Stronger." Hannah smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I feel different, like I'm becoming the person I was meant to be before. Before you were forced to be someone else," Kieran finished for her. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Hannah, I need to say something, and I want you to know that you don't need to respond unless you want to." Hannah's heart quickened. "What is it?" "These past months, watching you heal, watching you build a new life, it's been the greatest privilege of mine. You're the strongest person I've ever known and the most beautiful inside and out." Kieran's blue eyes held her steadily. "I'm falling in love with you, Hannah, but I understand if that's not something you're ready for, or if you never want to consider marriage again. Your friendship alone is more than enough." Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were different from the tears she'd shed in Everett's house. These were tears of joy, of possibility. "Kieran," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "you saved me. Not just from Everett, but from a life without hope. You showed me what a good man looks like, what respect and kindness feel like." She took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you too." The kiss they shared beside the creek was nothing like the forced, bitter kisses of Hannah's first marriage. This was gentle, questioning, full of promise. When they parted, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "We'll take it slow," he promised, "however long you need." Hannah nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I'd like that." Autumn painted the hills in fiery colors, and with the changing leaves came changes to the rocking M. Mr. Matthews, impressed with Kieran's management and Hannah's contributions to the household, offered them a proposal. "Martha and I aren't getting any younger," he said over dinner one evening. "We've been thinking of building a smaller house on the eastern pasture, something easier for us to manage. This main house, it needs a family, children running through the halls." Mrs. Matthews smiled at Hannah's stunned expression. "What my husband is trying to say, dear, is that we'd like to offer you and Kieran the opportunity to take over the main operations of the ranch. With you two running things, we could enjoy a more relaxed pace." "But we're not," Hannah began, looking at Kieran in confusion. "Not married," Mr. Matthews chuckled. "Well, that's easily remedied if you're both amenable. We've seen how you look at each other, and Kieran's already talking about building a nursery." Kieran's face flushed red. "I was just thinking ahead," he mumbled, not meeting Hannah's eyes. That night, beneath a sky filled with stars, Kieran formally asked Hannah to be his wife. On a blanket spread in the meadow where they'd first begun to know each other, he promised her a lifetime of respect, partnership, and love. "I can't offer you wealth or luxury," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness in his eyes. "But I can promise you this: you will never feel afraid in our home, you will never question your worth. And you will never doubt that you are loved, completely and utterly, every day of our lives together." Hannah's answer was a joyful yes, sealing her future with a man who had shown her what love truly meant. They married in October, a small ceremony in the rocking M garden with the mountains ablaze in autumn glory behind them. The ranch hands stood as witnesses. Mrs. Matthews cried happy tears, and Mr. Matthews gave the bride away with paternal pride. Hannah's father attended, subdued and shamefaced. The reconciliation was tentative, built on his genuine remorse and Hannah's cautious forgiveness. He would never be a significant part of her life again, but the bitter wound of his betrayal began slowly to heal. As winter settled over the valley, Hannah and Kieran settled into their new roles as stewards of the rocking M. The main house, once intimidating in its size, became a home filled with laughter and plans for the future. When the first snow fell, they sat before the fire in the study, Hannah's head resting on Kieran's shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "Sometimes I wake up afraid, thinking I'm back there with him. But then I feel you beside me, and I remember that I'm safe, that I'm loved." Kieran pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Always." Spring returned to the valley, bringing with it new calves, fresh green grass, and the news that Hannah was expecting their first child. As she stood on the porch, watching Kieran work with the horses in the corral, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach, Hannah marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened bride sold to pay a debt, to the mistress of a thriving ranch, loved by a man who treated her as an equal partner in all things. The family she had dreamed of as a young girl was becoming reality not through the marriage that had been forced upon her, but through the one she had freely chosen. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked later as they prepared for bed. Hannah smiled, guiding his hand to her growing belly. "I'm thinking about family, about how you gave me one when I'd lost all hope of ever having one of my own." "We gave each other a family," Kieran corrected gently, "and soon there will be one more to love." As Hannah drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought of the frightened young woman who had walked through a rainstorm, seeking escape. That woman could never have imagined the happiness that awaited her, a true marriage built on respect and affection, a home where she was valued, and a love that healed even the deepest wounds. The life that had begun in fear now continued in joy, each day bringing new reasons to be grateful for the cowboy who had saved her in more ways than one. Not just from a drunk and violent husband, but from a future without love, without hope, without family. And as their child grew within her, Hannah knew that this was just the beginning of their story, a story of redemption, of second chances, and of a love strong enough to build a future from the ashes of the past.